downtown Seattle, I'm Ursula Reutin.
From Kent to Capitol Hill, this is KIRO Radio, 97.3 FM. News and talk, powered by the Pacific Northwest.
The Dori Monson Show on KIRO Radio. This is The Big Lead.
Coming to you from the Carter Subaru studio. Welcome. Start of a new week, the dawn of a new era. We're also streaming on Facebook Live. We appreciate you spending part of your afternoon with us. And if you ever think you're having a bad day, if you ever think life has dealt you a challenge or two, I want you to listen to the young woman I'm going to talk to next hour, about 1:30 this afternoon. I'm going to talk to a 27-year-old young woman. I tend to call 27-year-olds girls because my girls, my daughters, are all around that age. But I'm going to talk to this 27-year-old young woman who's been diagnosed with terminal breast cancer. And she has the most incredible, uplifting story about her best day ever. And I sure would love you to hear this. I'm going to share that story with you. Coming up at 1:30 this afternoon. Coming up at 12:30, Brock Heward is going to join us to talk about that dominant Seahawk win in Detroit yesterday.
Looking at a 1st and goal from the 7. Hands the ball to Carson. He fights his way into the end zone. Touchdown, Seahawks. I think Chris Carson hit almost every defender on his way to the goal line and still pushed it in. We are literally just starting the 4th quarter, and Chris Carson already has 100 yards.
Yeah, it was just a dominant performance as they beat the Lions 28-14 yesterday. And Pete Carroll had some really interesting things to say about his team and about that fake punt by the Aussie toward the end of the game. So we'll revisit all of that coming up at 12:30, the Monday Monson quarterback. After the game yesterday, in the locker room, the Seahawks made an interesting game ball presentation, and very fitting, too.
Good job of staying together, going on the road and getting this. Beautiful job of staying together, going on the road and getting this work done. That's a beautiful day's work today now. Beautiful job, and you all know that. Let's take this moment. This is the first game that we have played, the Seahawks have played, since the passing of our owner, Paul Allen. Let's do this just in great spirit. He has done so much for all of us. Think about it, all of us. He's put us in this position where we are. We're going to keep celebrating the spirit that he's brought into our area, to our club, to the league, just to the world. He's an unbelievable, once-in-a-lifetime guy. We'll give him this ball. Bert, where's Bert? Bert, why don't you take the ball for him?
So Bert Cold, who's been Paul Allen's right-hand man through so many of his projects so they gave the game ball to. But they thought about Paul Allen right after that win yesterday for the Seahawks. So we'll talk with Brock Heward about all of that coming up at 12:30 this afternoon. With all of that as mere prelude, let's get into our big lead.
The Big Lead. Top story.
I was a little incredulous. And, I give the Seattle Times, I give them praise all the time, because I think they do a lot of great work. There was a story last week that made me a bit incredulous, however. They have a series called Project Homeless, and the headline is, how many homeless people in Seattle are from here? And what they did, and this isn't just Seattle, this is the entire Puget Sound area we're talking about here, but they said that the homeless advocates downplay that we are a magnet region for homelessness, which is something I say all the time. I'm absolutely convinced that we attract the dregs of the country to our region because the word is out that marijuana is legal statewide. Hard drugs are legal in King and Snohomish County as long as you have a small enough amount. And clearly, we are attracting people from all around the country. The Seattle Times conclusion was very different. In fact, they wrote in the story, there is scant evidence to show that Seattle and King County's homeless population has exploded primarily because lots of people came from outside the state. There is scant evidence that people are coming here from elsewhere. Which makes me ask the question, do you read your own newspaper? because let's go to what's in the news today. Remember there was Seattle Church in Rainier Valley about 11 days ago, and somebody threw Molotov cocktails at this church while there were 200 people inside? Well, they now have arrested a suspect in that Molotov bomb-throwing incident. The suspect has little ties to Seattle and was known to be staying at a homeless camp. He has previous arrests and a conviction from California. So once again, we have a suspect in a bombing, a Molotov cocktail, with 200 people inside the church being thrown at this church. And this was a homeless person who came here from California. But on and on it goes. Remember when the tourist was attacked near the Space Needle? When they were trying to choke the guy to death? The tourist in front of his family? That person, Michael Lee Person, told police he was homeless and moved to Seattle from Colorado 9 months ago. How about the shooting in SeaTac? They filed charges against a 30-year-old California man who fatally shot one man and wounded another. This was back in March. The attacks on young women in the U District. Guy named Sean Riley, 21 years old, charged with kidnapping, robbery, assault. He was originally from Texas. The woman who was brutally raped in the Ballard car dealership restroom. That guy came here from out of state. He, too, was a homeless man. His last known address was Texas. Just last week at Northwest University in Kirkland, a homeless man charged with assault after attacking a security guard. That transient male, according to his arrest and charging history, had previous arrests in Indiana, Illinois, and Oregon. The guy who hid in the Golden Gardens restroom and brutally attempted to rape and violently assaulted Kelly Herron, who's become a good friend of our radio show. Gary Steiner, he was a sex offender from Arizona. And I could go on and on and on. I shan't, but there are several other incidents. That the worst crimes that are being committed by homeless people around here, most of them, the vast majority, are people who have moved here from other states. And so how in the world, now maybe the Times argument is, well, the criminals all came from out of state, but the people who aren't committing crimes, they're just from around here. That would strain credulity that all the serious crimes committed by homeless people are people who have migrated here from out of state. But when the Times says there is scant evidence, that's their quote, there's scant evidence in Seattle and King County that homeless people have come here from outside the state. There's tons of evidence of that. When you rely on self-reporting, when you do surveys of the homeless people, when you talk to the homeless advocates, there is a financial incentive to say, yeah, my last address was King County. I grew up here. Because then the pitch from the politicians, the accused child rapists, kept telling us time and again, they had to raise our taxes so we could take care of our neighbors who have fallen on hard times. And that is the message they need to raise our taxes. We're just taking care of the kids we grew up with in school, and they just fell on hard times. But the crime stats tell a very different story, that the criminals around here have come from outside the state. They come because we have the most lenient drug laws in the country. They come because we have politicians who are bending over backwards to spend hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars over 10 years to coddle them And everybody I know who's truly in recovery as an addict says you got to hit rock bottom. And the fact that they make it so easy for people to just live and exist as a drug addict around here that they don't quite hit rock bottom because we make it so comfortable to be an addict and a criminal around here. I got an incredible story I'll share with you later this afternoon. Remember that RV in West Seattle, out of control, down a hill, crashed through the wall of a health club? Did $300,000 worth of damage, could have easily wiped out a family if there'd been a car in its path. They know, the health club people know who did it. They know where they are, and the cops haven't done anything about it yet. In 2 weeks. There's an indifference to doing anything about the vagrant drug criminals around here. And that's why we're attracting the dregs from all around the country. Case closed. Next up in the big lead.
The Big Lead, big local.
That's our news partners at KIRO 7. They have another neighborhood, the Inner Bay neighborhood, another area that is just riddled with RVs. And I used to play Babe Ruth baseball at the playfield at Inner Bay. Overlooked the train tracks there. It was, a nice bucolic place. It's on the bus line from Ballard, so I could take the bus to and from practice. Kind of a bucolic place. I was 13 years old when I was playing Babe Ruth ball at Inner Bay. Now, you may remember, one of the first real drug vagrant stories that we covered several years ago was when a youth football coach contacted us because a drug vagrant had set up a tent in the end zone of the football field that the kids played on. The coaches have to go 45 minutes early to pick up hypodermic needles that are left scattered all around the field there, and the city lets it persist. Our city council continues to enable it. Our prosecutors continue to legalize the worst drugs. And KIRO 7, they talked to, there's a place called Figurehead Brewery. And the owner there, Bob Monroe, has just had it with the crime in their neighborhood.
It was kind of a shock, but I guess crime has picked up a little bit around the neighborhood. I guess maybe we've been lucky up to this point.
But some of these drug vagrants, they broke in.
Pried open the back door, kind of went straight to the safe, so he must have cased the place beforehand. Went back and forth a couple times to get different crowbars, and he was out with the safe in about 4 minutes.
Another business owner, Cafe Appassionato, Phil Sankton, he said that, it's really bad.
It's a bit of a war zone down here.
And they have some vans that have been, heavily damaged.
Someone used a crowbar to pry open the latch on the outside of the van and then broke their way in and then pried out the ignition lock. I think their goal was to steal the van.
And the solution, as I've been telling you for years now, we need more cops. We need a complete overhaul of the city council. We need to get away from the far left ideology that has created this problem throughout our region, because this is very much a left-wing politics problem, because what we did was the accused child rapist added 1,300 city workers, and yet our police department is dramatically understaffed, and we have city council members who call cops who have been exonerated murderers. Nobody wants to be a cop in Seattle anymore, and that's the solution. We need more cops.
It actually could have been a lot worse, so it just took our safe, so we consider ourselves a little lucky anyways.
Which brings me to the next story in our big lead.
The Big Lead. I sense a Dori rant coming on.
So why do we have so much crime throughout this region? Why don't we have enough police officers? Well, again, I just told you, it's because of leftist politics. In Seattle, on the ballot, a week from tomorrow, what they call free community college for all. Jenny Durkin wants to raise your property taxes $620 million so that kids who go to Seattle public high schools can get free community college. That's what they call it in the Seattle Times headline. It ain't free. It's just asking other people to pay for somebody else's kids to go to community college. And as I've said a million times, if those kids want to go to college, they should have gotten a part-time job starting their junior year in high school and summers off. They could easily have salted away over 2 years, a couple of years of community college tuition. They could pay for themselves. If the kids don't want to do it, then maybe their mom and dad should have gotten a second job to pay for their own kids to go to college. But that's not how we do it in Seattle. We let the drug vagrants take over the streets. We don't put enough cops out there to deal with it. And then we raise property taxes so that people who have maybe already scrimped and saved to send their own kids to college, now they're going to be taxed to send other people's kids to college. It is a dramatic example of a lack of prioritization. Maybe we should clean up the drug vagrants, and maybe we should clean up the worst property crime of any city in the country, any major city, top 20 population. Seattle's the worst. Maybe we should clean that up before we raise taxes $620 million so people can send other people's children to community college. But this is a classic example of what happens when you have leftist ideology that is completely at conflict with the reality that's on the streets and in front of all of us. And that is your big lead for today.
The Big Lead on KIRO Radio.
Thank goodness, amidst all of this madness, that we got a really fun football team to watch and talk about. Brock Heward is the Monday Monson quarterback, and we'll tell you what Pete Carroll, it's really funny, what Pete Carroll told Brock on his show this morning. We will review coming up next with Brock on the Dori Monson Show.